BlogTalk Radio.
Welcome to Hell is for Children, a blog talk radio program for and by protective mothers with your host, Geerte Franken. So what's a protective mother? A protective mother tries to protect her child or children from their abusive father by many means necessary. Yes, you can call in. Are you ready? Operation Expose continues.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Hell is for Children. This is a blog talk radio show for and by protective mothers, and anyone who has input on the topic of protective mothers can call in. This show is on every Saturday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, and the show will soon be moving to CCN Live TV, so that will be wonderful. We'll have all the archived recordings on YouTube as well, so stay tuned for more announcements on that. And that said, I want to thank Bobby Biesinger from World Integrity News Network for offering us this platform on Blog Talk Radio to give us an opportunity to support each other and to think about solutions in regards to solving the fact that our children are being court abducted. And today's guest on that particular topic is Anita Duncan. And she's from England, and she lost custody of her son and daughter to their abusive father in the United States. And Anita Duncan works with the organization GlobalARRK that has formed to help mothers in our situation. So let's see if Anita is on. Hi, Anita. Can you hear me?
Hi, Geerte. Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Hi. Welcome to Hell is for Children.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here with you today.
Well, you know, I've known you for a while, Anita, and so I know your story, but I'd really like you to share your story with our global audience. How did you end up becoming a protective mother? Where are you located now, and what's going on with you and your children? How did you end up in this situation?
Right. Well, it is, as all of these stories are, it is fairly a complex story with lots of different strands intertwining in the end. I am now in England. I live in the south of England without my children. My children are in the United States, in the western part of the United States, and they are forced to stay there as long as, well, as far as I can tell, until they're at least 18. I have not seen them now for over 10 months. So wow. It's a very hard thing for me to talk about. Yeah.
I know it's, and you know what? That's I totally understand that, and I want to, you know, commend you on your courage to share your story, because, you know, all my guests that come on, you know, that it's so intense to share your story. It's so personal and emotional. So thank you for being courageous and sharing that with all of us today. Do you have any contact with your children as we speak, or no contact at all?
I do have some contact with them, and my daughter sometimes sends me text messages on Skype. We do get to speak on Skype, which is great because of the video aspect. Probably about once a month, I guess, I get a Skype call with her. I phone them several times a week. I leave messages every time I phone, but they have never yet heard one of my messages. And I guess I speak to them on average once a week on the telephone. My son, unfortunately, I do not get to speak to very often, maybe once every 3 or 4 weeks. He's in a place where he doesn't want to talk to me most of the time, which is hard.
I bet.
Yeah, but it happens to a lot of children. I've spoken to so many mothers who say that their children have turned against them, their children don't want to have any contact. And the way I look at it is, I believe the children who are trying to turn away, to break off contact, to maybe sound mean to their mother, they're just trying to protect themselves and live the best they can in the situation they've been forced to live in.
Yeah, it's Stockholm syndrome, I think it's called.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. Yes. Yes. Yes.
And so they
and
kind of
Sorry.
yeah, they're just kind of surviving and wading through it. So yeah, it's a difficult situation for them to be in as well.
It is. It's very, very difficult for them, and my heart goes out to all the children and all the mothers, and I just feel so bad that nothing is really being done. This is a situation, a problem, if you like, that actually is solvable. It just needs a little bit more work, a little bit of money, a little bit less money going into the business of dealing with families and children and mothers, a little bit more money going into investigating what's happening and making sure that children's best interests are really put first rather than the best interests of attorneys and courts and money-making businesses. And that's what we at GlobalARRK are hoping to do in the future. We hope one day to not be required anymore. That's our aim, to be out of business.
We'll talk about that a little bit more in the second hour, but
Sure.
tell us how your children ended up in the United States and you in England.
Okay. Well, I'm British, as you can probably hear. My ex-husband is American. He's a U.S. citizen. He was born and brought up in New York. We met when we were both living in Europe, and we lived together for a while in Germany. He was actually living in the Netherlands, in your country, when we met.
Okay.
And he moved to Germany to be with me. We both had our own companies in Europe that we were running, but mine was very location-specific. His was based all over the world, so he moved, and I kept my company running. He kept his company running. We had 2 children that were both born in Germany. Because I had been in Germany for over 10 years, I was actually eligible for German citizenship, although I didn't take it. But it did mean that when my children were born, they automatically were German citizens. They are also British citizens, as I'm British, and they're also U.S. citizens, as their father is a U.S. citizen. So they have 3 birth certificates and 3 nationalities and 3 passports each, German, British, American.
Wow.
Yeah. It's quite unusual, but it's fortunate for them. So they can live pretty much anywhere in the world that they want to when they grow up, of course. We moved to the United States when my daughter, my youngest child, was just less than 3 months old. We left Germany. My son was just 2. My daughter was just a few months old. We moved to the U.S., where my ex-husband wanted to become a commercial pilot. So he completed his training, which took a few years, and then got a job with an airline in the United States, a regional airline. So he was a pilot, which meant that he was away most of the time, obviously, when he was working. And I stayed home with my children. I was their primary carer right from the very beginning. In Germany, as I said, I ran my own company, but I gave that up so that I could stay home with my kids. And I worked part-time as a journalist. So I fitted that around looking after my children, taking care of the home, making sure that all their needs were met, and, of course, taking care of my ex-husband as well when he was home. Unfortunately, he was very controlling, very abusive, psychologically and emotional, but also physically. He controlled all the finances as well, and he was sexually abusive. So I very soon realized after moving to the United States that there was no way for me to leave. I did not know about the Hague Convention at that time. That was not something that I'd heard about. I knew nothing about it. My feeling was more that if I tried to do anything against my ex-husband, he would either have me deported from the country or he would just kill me. And he actually said to me, within a few weeks of arriving in the United States, he said to me that if I ever did anything against him, he would make sure I would never see my children again. And sadly, he was right. That's what he's done. But it was a complicated way to get to that. I stayed in the U.S. for over 7 years, just putting up with the situation, trying to make the best of things, trying to be happy whenever he was not there, when he was out of state. Our life was okay. But we had, of course, no family support. The friends that we'd made in the area were wonderful. But when you've got kids, it's nice to be with family and to have the support of the country that you know the best, systems that you understand. The education system for the children, of course, is generally better in Europe than in much of the United States. And I just missed my family very much and my friends that I'd had for many, many years, decades. So I wanted to return, but I had no option. As I said, I felt he would either get me deported, perhaps by, for example, planting drugs in my car and making an anonymous call to the police, or he would simply shoot me one day, perhaps in the middle of the night, and say he thought it was an intruder. It happens all the time. And he had at least 2 guns in the house. So I felt, and I still believe, that was a very valid fear. What happened was, after over 7 years, my parents became very unwell. They visited us every year at Christmas, and we returned to England every year in the summer. So my parents saw me and the children at least twice a year for many weeks. They became very ill. They were unable to travel. So I wanted to return to England to help them, to try and help them find accommodation better suited to their needs as they were aging. And my ex-husband agreed that I could come back to England for an extended stay over the summer. That was in 2013, to assist my parents. The trip got delayed for various reasons. In the end, we left in the middle of July 2013, and he agreed that I could rent a house in England, live there with the children. And he actually wrote and suggested that I enroll the children in school in England so that they didn't miss out on their education, that they could attend school in England while I was there helping my family. He also wanted me to say that we were separated, which of course I was very happy to do. As far as I was concerned at that point, we were separated. And so he gave us no financial support whatsoever. He expected us to survive on our own with my income as a part-time freelance journalist. And I did manage to do that. I had family help, I had family support. We were in England very close to family, living near aunts and cousins and grandparents, everybody else, and old family friends. So we managed to survive, and the children went to school and were very happy. He visited us a few times as a pilot. He bought us the tickets to go there, one-way tickets. And we were basically delighted with the way our lives were turning out. We were in England, we were all happy, we felt safe, we felt secure, and he kept delaying our return. I never said we would not return, but of course I was hoping that he would find life without having to deal with wife and kids a lot better, because he often complained about it. And financially, of course, he was much better off. He told us we should return around Christmas time. Then he said, no, don't come back over Christmas. Stay in England for Christmas. He actually visited us for 12 days over the Christmas and New Year period. He then had a new job, so he said he would be doing training for a few weeks. So we should stay in England and return maybe in March. So we were happy to do that. He then contacted me and said, okay, now I finished my training, you have to come back next week. My comment was, well, the kids are in school. It's quite important for their education that we don't just get up and say, today's Tuesday, you go to school, tomorrow's Wednesday, we go to the airport and go back to America. I didn't feel that was the best way of dealing with their education or their emotions either. They were very close to family. It made a great circle of friends. We'd been there nearly a year by that time. So I told my ex that we needed to discuss it and work out what was best for the children. He told me he didn't care about their education. He wanted us to return. He, at this point, threatened to come to England by himself and remove the children from me and take them back to the United States. He said I could do what I wanted. I could stay in England or return with him, but he was taking his American children back to America.
And they weren't even American. They were actually born in Germany, so they were actually German.
Well, yeah, as I said, they have 3 nationalities, and we all know that the Hague Convention is not concerned with the nationality. But yes, they were born in Germany. They have British and German citizenship as well as U.S. citizenship.
Right.
So, but according to him, they were American children. They are American children, and American children should grow up in America, according to him, and according to, of course, many U.S. citizens in the U.S. courts as well. At this point, I decided to go to the police I had never dared talk to the police or to any domestic violence agency in the United States because, as I mentioned earlier, I was worried that my ex-husband would somehow have me deported or jailed or would just simply kill me. That would be the easiest option. So I had never talked to the police before or to any help agencies, but I did go to the police when he said he was going to come and take the children. The police told me, and this was March 2014, they said that that was an abduction threat. They took it very seriously. They put alarms on our doors and windows, free of charge for us. They spoke to the children's school. They set up what they call trigger plans for the event that he entered the United Kingdom. So his name was on port alert with the immigration authorities if he were to try and enter the country. And the idea was I had to keep a bag packed in my car so that if the police contacted me and said, okay, he's entering the country, I had to grab the kids from wherever they were, whether they were at school, visiting friends, asleep in bed, wherever they were, put them in the car and drive to a safe place. I had arranged with a friend that if necessary I would visit her and stay with her in another part of the country. And that's what the police organized with me. They took it very seriously. They also did a questionnaire with me. They went through a risk assessment, which apparently is standard practice, talking about my relationship. And they determined that I had been, of course, abused and I had suffered at his hands. And they also said that as far as they were concerned, what I was describing to them was rape, marital rape. So they wanted, again, to arrest him and question him about that. He actually, in the end, did not return to this country to get the children. He instead invoked the Hague Convention and started Hague Convention proceedings, which he filed in June 2014. So this, remember, is almost exactly 1 year since we had arrived in the UK. We arrived in July 2013. He filed Hague towards the end of June 2014. So he just made the deadline for filing Hague. Excuse me. He did enter the UK finally in August 2014, which was for the first Hague Convention proceedings hearing in London. And he was arrested as he entered the country. As he got to the airport, he was arrested. He was taken to the police station and questioned. He was arrested for marital rape, and he was remanded on bail with quite strict conditions, which included being barred from the town we lived in and not being able to contact me or communicate with me directly at all. I then had to go through the hearings at the High Court in London, and I received legal aid, thank goodness, so I did not have to represent myself. I was able to work with a solicitor and a barrister, so the names for the English legal professionals, because I was a victim of domestic violence. I got the legal aid, full legal aid, and I did not have to pay any contribution myself, so I did get some help.
The word for lawyer in British is barrister, yes? That's what you just...
A barrister, yes. We have two kinds of lawyer. We have a solicitor who normally you would go and visit and discuss your issues with, who would help you draw up paperwork, work on a case, decide how to progress with a case. And then you have a barrister who is the kind of lawyer that is specialized, who can stand up in court and argue your case for you.
Kind of like the paralegal and the lawyer in the States.
Well, yes, but a solicitor is also a very highly qualified professional lawyer, and they have certain rights as well. It's just that it's an archaic system in Britain, really, and generally, in order to speak in front of the High Court, you need to employ the services of a barrister.
I see. Okay.
They're the ones you might see in movies very often, especially in the criminal court. They wear those little white wigs and black gowns.
Yes, I've seen that.
Yeah, that's not necessary in the civil cases or in the family court system, but in criminal courses, yes, so that's what differentiates them from the solicitors. And they do not get very involved in cases. They are briefed by a solicitor, usually, and the solicitor tells them about the case, tells them the issues, tells them which direction to try and argue in. They then stand up in court and argue the case for you. So it's a very strange system because it means you actually have very little contact with your barrister. I had 4 or 5 hearings, and I had a different barrister for just about every hearing.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how much they really understood about my case or understood about the different aspects of it. It was, it made it very confusing. I never knew who was going to be representing me.
Doesn't sound like a good idea when you have a complex international case like this. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, well, that's the way it works. So that's the way you have to do it.
Right.
Okay, what happened was I agreed in court on the advice of my barristers. I agreed to return voluntarily to the United States. Mm-hmm. And they told me this would be the best thing to do because I would then be able to get undertakings from my ex-husband, well, husband as he still was at this point, and I could also get court orders to protect me when I returned to the U.S.
What's an undertaking?
An undertaking is a promise you make to the court. For example, I undertake to pay my wife $2,000 a month to live on living expenses.
Okay.
So it's a binding promise that you make in front of the court. And so that is negotiated between the lawyers. So I had various undertakings, for example, agreement that I would have a vehicle, that he would rent an apartment for us to live in, that I would get a certain amount of money to live off, that the health insurance would continue, those kind of things. Mm-hmm. I also had orders of protection for myself and the children, that he was not to remove the children from me, that he was not allowed to approach me physically, of course, and he was also told that he was not permitted to start any proceedings to file any motions in court in the United States before I was in the U.S. with the children. Mm-hmm. And that would allow me time to find an attorney in the U.S. to represent me and to get help. So those were some of the most important issues for safeguarding and the conditions we had to feel safe when we returned. I also filed for divorce in the United Kingdom, but that was later dropped and the divorce went through in the United States instead. So I got back to the United States with the children at the beginning of November 3rd, 2014. And I went straight the next morning to the family court to, I think it was called domesticate the orders of protection. I was told by the domestic violence agencies that I should go straight to family court, show them the order of protection from the UK, and get a local order of protection for myself and my children. Mm-hmm. Now, when I arrived at the airport, I was approached by who I later learned was a process server who attempted to give me a pile of paperwork. I refused to accept it because I didn't know what it was. I had no idea what I would be agreeing to if I accepted this paperwork, and I was quite safe in the under the impression that, of course, nothing legal could be happening because I was only just returning to the U.S. and my ex-husband had been told he was not allowed to file anything until I was back in the U.S. So I knew there was no court case.
Right.
The process server then went around the corner and then returned with my husband, ex-husband as he is now. Yeah, and with a police officer with a very large dog, an Alsatian, a German Shepherd, I believe. So it was very intimidating for me. I was scared anyway returning to the U.S. And there was my ex-husband who in Britain was not allowed anywhere near me. And he was standing there smiling with a big police officer with this process server, and they were telling me I had to take these papers. It was very scary, very intimidating. I managed to not accept the papers. The process server put them at my feet and said, "There you go, you're served." I stepped around them and left the area, but I was really shaking and very scared. And the next morning when I went to the court to get my orders of protection, I told the judge in the court as well that had happened, and he said, yep, he agreed. Based on the doctrine of comity, I should have orders of protection in the U.S. as well. And he immediately gave me orders of protection for myself and the children. So I felt a little bit safer at that point. I felt I was getting the same protection in the U.S. as I did in my own country. But what I didn't realize at that time, Jetta, is that I should have actually been in the Supreme Court downtown because my ex-husband had in fact filed all sorts of ex parte orders. And the first hearing was that morning. So he had broken the British court undertakings and court orders which he'd agreed to, where he promised not to start any proceedings. And the papers he tried to give me as I arrived at the airport the night before would have informed me that I was due in court that morning. But of course I didn't take them. I was scared to take them. I didn't know what it meant. I figured I would find an attorney, tell the attorney that someone had tried to give me paperwork and what could it possibly mean. I didn't realize that the paperwork was there to tell me what kind of motions had already been filed against me. So I had an email when I came out of the court with my order's protection, feeling a little bit happier, I managed to get some Wi-Fi. Remember, I just got back to the country. I was trying to sort out Wi-Fi and phone and places to stay with my kids and so on. So I realized I managed to log into some Wi-Fi, and I found an email from my ex-husband with a timestamp of 10:33 a.m. reminding me that, as I knew because I had been served with these papers the day before, although of course he knew that I had not taken them, he would see me in court at 11:30 that morning. So his email was 57 minutes before the time of the court hearing. It wouldn't have even given me time to get to court anyway, even if I had to.
No, but that's not proper serving anyway. And you know, the fact that you didn't take the papers at the airport would have meant that they would have had to try and serve you in a different way. So, well, but anyway,
apparently
go
not.
on.
No, the judge eventually decided that I had been properly served at the airport, and it was my fault that I didn't take the papers. It was my fault I didn't know about the hearing. It was my fault I was not prepared. It was my fault I didn't have an attorney. And at the end of the day, she kept pointing her finger at me and saying, it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault. And it was, I guess, in her opinion, my fault that my children were taken away from me. So, yes, I called the court when I saw this email and realized that I'd missed a hearing, apparently. I phoned the court, spoke to the judge's clerk, or clerk, as they say in the U.S., and I was told that, yes, I had missed a hearing, but there was another one the next day. So by this time, I'd only gotten off the plane less than 24 hours previously. I was jet-lagged, I was exhausted, I was stressed. I was told I had to be in court the next afternoon, and it was not their problem that I didn't know where the court was, I didn't have any transport, I had nobody to take care of my kids. That was not the court's problem, it was my problem. So I managed to get to court. I had to take the children with me. Mm-hmm. They were 7 and 9 at this point. And they had to wait outside the courtroom. One of the, I think the judge's clerk stayed with them, and maybe one of the security personnel. Of course, we were all very stressed. We didn't really understand what was happening. I went into court. I was sitting there by myself. I had no copies of any papers. I didn't know what was happening. All I knew was that I had been told to be in court. My ex-husband was present with an attorney, because, of course, he'd had an attorney for months. And I was told by the judge that she had granted my ex-husband sole custody and sole legal decision-making the day before, because I had not even bothered to attend court. She kept saying it was my fault. I should have taken the paperwork. I should have read the email from my ex-husband. She kept pointing her finger. She said, you're a liar. It's your fault. She ordered me not to talk to CPS, the Child Protective Services, or the police. She said she didn't want to hear that I'd been talking to anybody. Otherwise, I would suffer further severe consequences.
Wow.
When I said, I don't understand what's happening, that was my fault. When I said I don't know what to do, that was my fault. When I said I don't understand what you're talking about, that was my fault. Finally, I said there were two things. One was that I had the order of protection from the other family court, which I'd obtained the day before. And she kind of rolled her eyes in exasperation and asked me to bring it to her to show her. She was like, okay, let's see it. And she said that she couldn't remove the children from me because of this. But she did say to my ex-husband's attorney, she says, have you been served with this? He said, no. So she said, what do you want to do? If you accept it now, then you're being served. He went, oh, that's fine, no problem. They took the paperwork, looked at it, laughed. And she said to the attorney, what do you want to do? He said, well, of course, we would like a hearing. Now, I knew this would happen. I had been told when I got the order of protection in the first family court that, of course, the children's father was entitled to a hearing. Mm-hmm. And that it would usually take about 10 days from the date of being served to arrange for a hearing. So I would have that time to find an attorney, to sort out paperwork and, decide what to do and so on. So the judge said to the attorney there in court, "What do you want to do?" He said, "I'd like a hearing." She said, "Great. Shall we do it now?"
Oh, my God.
And he was like, "Yeah, let's do it now." And I just stood up. I was like, "Your Honor, I don't even understand what's happening. I just arrived in this country like less than 48 hours ago. I don't have anywhere to stay with the children. I don't have an attorney. I don't know what's happening. I have these court orders from Britain, from London. I was told I would have at least 10 days to get an attorney. I was told that nothing like this would be happening." She was like, "Well, it's your fault. Okay, let's do it at 2 o'clock tomorrow." So I had 22 hours to find an attorney, bring him up to speed with my case, and have the hearing for the orders of protection. The other thing I did manage to do was ask for a guardian ad litem, which is what the domestic violence advocacy had told me to make sure I did. So I did ask for a guardian ad litem. The judge laughed and said, "We don't call it that here in this state." And I said, "Well, I'm very sorry. I'm not an attorney. I don't know what you call it. I'm just trying to do my best for my kids." She said, "Well, I guess you mean a best interest attorney." Like, okay, whatever they're called. So she did appoint one for my children. And I was told to attend court the next day, either by myself or with an attorney if I could find one. So that was how the first day in court ended.
Crazy.
Yeah. So that evening, around 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, this best interest attorney that had been appointed by the court visited. She spoke to each of my children individually and also to me. And she told me that she would be recommending to the judge the next day that the children stay with me. She also gave me some advice on what to say in court, what to ask for, just in case I couldn't get an attorney myself. So I felt she was being very helpful. The next day I managed to get an attorney to attend on a one-off basis just for that hearing, just so that I would have someone to be there in court with me. And at that hearing, the best interest attorney, she stood up and said she recommended the children be awarded solely to their father, effective immediately.
Oh, my God.
The judge quashed all the orders of protection, ordered me not to ever make any further allegations against my husband, and again kept saying it was all my fault. She ordered us to attend family therapy the next day at a cost of $1,400 per parent. And when I said I had no money, I just arrived in the U.S., I had no bank account, it was nighttime in England, so impossible to even ask for a loan from any of my friends or family in the UK, and generally impossible to transfer money abroad so quickly. The judge actually told me to beg, borrow, or steal the money.
Wow.
But she said if I did not have the money, I would face further severe consequences. So I fortunately did manage to borrow the money off friends in America, and I managed to pay. Of course, later on, that was held against me that I'd said I had no money, but I did manage to find $1,400, so obviously I had money. Basically, you can't win whatever you do. I talked also about the abuse that I'd suffered, and at one point, my ex-husband's attorney stood up in court and smiled at me and said, "Oh, so you allowed yourself to be raped many times." Fortunately, the attorney I had with me objected, and the judge also reprimanded him for that, but that was the kind of tone of the whole thing. Basically, the idea that I had ever been abused was laughed at. My ex-husband's attorney said to him, "Have you ever raped anyone?" And he said, "Of course not." And the judge smiled and said, "See?" He said, "Have you ever had your hands around anyone's throat and threatened to choke them and said you would kill them?" And my ex-husband laughed and said, "Of course not." And the judge smiled and said, "See, he's a nice guy." So I was branded a liar, and yeah, that was that. So my children were removed from me on 6th of November. we had landed back in the state on the 3rd of November. So less
Wow.
than 2 hours later, they were taken away from me. And from then on until, for another 2 months, until the 8th of November, I was only allowed to see them very briefly during these terrible family therapy sessions that we were forced to go through and pay for. I was told by the judge on leaving the court that I was to go outside and say goodbye to my children, tell them they were going home with Daddy, and to smile and be happy. And if I showed any emotion, because I was crying at this point, and the observers from the domestic violence agencies and from another law firm who were in court observing the proceedings were also in tears. But she said if anyone showed any emotions, there would be further severe consequences and penalties. So I had to dry my eyes and smile and go out to my children and say, hey, kids, you're going home with Dad tonight. And, yeah, they were, of course, terrified. They were very afraid of him. They knew how abusive he was. So that was a very, very, very difficult time. And then, as I said, I only saw them sporadically for 2 months, having seen them just about every day for their entire lives. They were just taken away from me. And we had another hearing at the end of November. So this was 3 weeks later. And then I was told I was only permitted supervised visitation with my 2 children 3 times a week for a total of 10 hours a week. And that was all. I would be seeing them until we had our final hearing in February. The final hearing was unfortunately postponed until the end of March in the end. So from November till the end of March, I was only permitted to see my children 10 hours a week under supervision, which made it really, really hard. I had to find a place to stay in that city and fund myself. I wasn't able to work. I had no income. I had no family support. I had nothing. But I had to try and exist until the end of March. The only good thing was I still had health insurance because we were still legally married. So we had the final hearing, and my ex-husband took indefinite leave from work for over 6 months, so he was classed as indigent and without any financial resources, although he was using his mother's money for things like buying a new house and so on. The children's passports were held by my ex-husband, all 3 of them, with British, US, and German passports. And, the supervised visitation continued. That period that I was seeing my children under supervision, my ex-husband was very strict in his control. He imposed lots of restrictions. He did not want me to be permitted to have lunch with them at the school or from seeing them at school. He was given the power to approve the supervisors we had. Well, it was supposed to be a joint decision, but obviously that meant it was his decision. I did not have to go to court or appointed supervisors. We were allowed to use friends as supervisors, but my ex-husband made them sign contracts with him, telling them how dangerous I was and telling people I would go to jail as I was a kidnapper. He told our friends that they were not to let me out of their sight at any moment. I was not allowed to drive or be alone with the children. At one point, some of my friends were under the belief that I was not even allowed to use the bathroom by myself because I was so dangerous, according to what I was trying to tell them. Yeah, it was horrific. So, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year, my daughter's birthday, all of these times I had to be supervised with my children. I was never allowed to tuck them in at night, say goodnight to them, make them breakfast in the morning. I couldn't even cook for them. I didn't have a home. I had nowhere to live. I was staying with various people. At one point I rented a room for a few months in a house. So I had nowhere to go. I had no money. It was very difficult. I was trying to make sure that I would have an attorney for the hearings. And it was all just very difficult, very expensive, incredibly stressful, obviously. Finally, after about 6 months, we had our final court hearing. We got the final ruling. And the judge decided that my children should reside permanently with my ex-husband. And we have shared legal decision-making, which means for things like education, health, religion, and so on, it's shared. But she was very careful to note that if we could not agree on any decisions, their father has the final say. So his interpretation of that is, I'm not discussing anything with you. I'm telling you this is what I'm doing. And that's what he does. In fact, he does not tell me of anything. I don't know which doctor they see anymore. I don't know. My daughter had some tests in hospital recently. I don't know what that was about. He refuses to respond to any emails from me now. I've had, I think, 2 or 3 emails from him since the beginning of December last year, despite the fact that, of course, I have lots of questions about our children and what's happening to them, but he does not respond. So the judge also, as well as giving him the final say in all decisions, told me that I had to pay 50% of his legal costs because it was my fault that he had any legal costs, as well, of course, as my own legal costs. I also, as we lived in the community property estate, have to pay 50% of his debt. So his legal costs were about $40,000, so I have to pay half of that. His debts were about $25,000, credit card debts, which I knew nothing about. So I have to pay half of that. And I have to pay more than $300 a month in child support to him. Now, the maximum I ever earned as a freelance journalist was about $1,500 a month. And that's the maximum. It's usually less than that. So I'm supposed to support myself and find over $300 a month to pay the child support. My ex-husband is a pilot. He's a first officer with a pretty decent airline in the United States. I also have to pay 50% of any medical costs that my children incur. Although, of course, as you know, if they were in Europe, in England especially, there are no medical costs. Healthcare is free for everyone under 18 and for most people over 18 as well. So I was unable to afford to stay in the United States. I had offered parenting plans suggesting that I take the children back to the United Kingdom, which is where they had been living very happily for well over a year, for nearly a year and a half. And that I said if that was permitted, I would not ask for alimony, I would not ask for child support, I would not ask for anything financially. My husband could keep the house, keep the cars, keep his pension, keep everything. Just allow us to go, and he could, of course, visit them anytime he wanted. They could come back to the U.S. for holidays, that I would not try and interfere with that. Or if they didn't allow the children to leave and the children had to stay in the U.S., of course I would stay in the U.S., but I was going to need some financial help. I'm over 50 yet, and I need health insurance. I have prior conditions, so it's quite expensive. I need health insurance. I had no job history in the U.S. I hadn't really worked for over 10 years. My qualifications are not recognized in the U.S., so I needed to go back to school to get some qualifications that could help me get a good job in the United States. And I had no money. I had no savings. I had these huge debts. So I said, I will stay, of course, but I'm going to need quite a lot of alimony and support to help me. The judge decided that I believe her words in the final decree were that because I'm manipulative and deceptive, I'm not entitled to alimony. Though I do get the debt, of course. I do get 50% of the debt, but I'm not entitled to any alimony. Yeah. So, and she said I should return to the United Kingdom and get a good job because, as you know, they are falling off trees in Europe. It's so easy to get a job. You just walk into the country and they say, here, have a job, please, earn lots of money. Unfortunately, that didn't happen to me. I still don't have a good job. But she said I should return to England, get myself a good job, and see the children during the school vacation time, which meant 2 weeks at Christmas. 8 days over Christmas and New Year, 2 weeks in the spring break period, and 8 weeks in the summer vacation. So I'm supposed to return to the United Kingdom, get myself a job that's going to pay me enough to visit the U.S., nearly the West Coast, 3 times a year, pay for accommodation, pay to hire a vehicle, pay to entertain my children for a total of nearly 12 weeks a year. And I don't know anyone who has a job.
And pay him child support and his attorney's fees and the medical expenses. Right.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So that has proved to be impossible. I did manage to return to the U.S. last summer for my 8 weeks with my children. I borrowed money to do that. I borrowed a lot of money to do that. And I wanted to make sure we had a really great summer, lots of good experiences. I had to stay in-state with them. I'm not allowed to leave the state with them, of course. And I did try paying a little bit of the child support while I could. I returned. He also went back to court to say that it was unfair on him as a father to be without his children for 8 weeks in the summer, if they were going to be with me for 8 weeks. And the judge, in her wisdom, agreed with him that as a father, it was completely impossible for him to not see his children for 8 weeks. So I was to stay in state and return them to the city that we lived in so that he could spend 24 hours with them every 7 days. So once a week, he got 24 hours because he couldn't possibly be without them for even 7 whole days.
Right,
now,
but you're supposed to be without them all the time.
Yes. Yeah, I'm just the mother. I just gave birth to them, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that's the way it worked. So it made the summer difficult because it meant we couldn't really travel or go away very far. Although it's a large state, we had to keep returning to be near his home so that he could have them for 24 hours every 6 days.
Yeah.
So that was the last time I saw my children, was the 3rd of August last year when I had to return them to their father for the last time. And he immediately took them off to Florida, to Disney World, because he's allowed to travel anywhere he wants with them. He's also since taken them to Jamaica, and they're actually in Florida at Disney as we speak, because he's allowed to take them anywhere he wants. But I haven't seen them since last August. So, yeah, what else? I really have very little contact, and I don't know what's happening. I don't know. If I return to the U.S., I'm worried now that I could be arrested and jailed for non-payment of child support, because that is an offense that you can be jailed for. I'm also still very afraid of my ex-husband, and I have made statements to the police in 2 countries that one day I believe he will kill me. Not now. I don't feel that I'm under threat of that right now, but maybe in like 8 or 10 years or 15 years or something like that. I don't think he will ever forgive me for having him arrested. So that's something I do believe. And I think he will stop at nothing to have me jailed if he can find a way of doing that. He tried a couple of times last summer to have the police arrest me, which the police just basically ended up laughing about because they said it was so stupid. But he does keep trying. I worry about my children's health. He moved a girlfriend into his house, his new house, almost immediately to take care of them. So some woman I don't know is taking care of my children. They don't get any of the extracurricular activities that I made sure they got. They don't get to see any of their old friends. His main argument in London originally for returning to the US was that that's where they had spent the last few years, which was true, that they should return to their home that they'd grown up in, the school that they'd attended, and all the local friends that they'd grown up with. Well, he bought a new house, moved them so they're not in their home. He put them in a new school, and he doesn't permit them to see any of their friends. So all of those arguments are completely pointless and useless.
Yeah.
There are other things that I worry about as well, of course. Any mother has all these worries and concerns about her children always. And I don't know what's happening to them. I don't know what they're eating. I don't know what kind of exercise they're getting. I don't know what they're reading. My ex-husband has a lot of pornography in the house. He has at least 2 firearms. My children have said to me separately many times while we were in England that they would rather die than be with him. So I'm very worried. They don't see a therapist. They were ordered by court to attend therapy. They went to 2 or 3 sessions. My ex-husband found a therapist who would see them all together. So he attended with the 2 children. The therapist agreed with him after 2 or 3 sessions that the children were perfectly happy, perfectly well adjusted, and in no need of therapy whatsoever. Now, as we all know, any child whose parents have got divorced are going to need help in dealing with it, even if it's an amicable divorce. Splitting up the family home, breaking up the family home, they're going to need help, no matter what. My children, who I was their primary caregiver, generally their only caregiver their entire lives, I was suddenly ripped away from them from one minute to the next. They don't need therapy? Okay, all right. So I have to try not to think about it too much because it's really, really hard to deal with. Very hard to deal with. I don't know when I'm going to see them again. I've asked repeatedly that they visit me in England. One of the things that my ex-husband did agree in court was to bring them to England to visit me if I wished. And the judge agreed and said that I would have to post a $20,000 bond if the children were to visit me in the United Kingdom. I have a very good friend, fortunately, who is prepared to lend me the $20,000, so I can provide that bond. Although, of course, I don't have that kind of money, but I have people who will help me. But my ex-husband is refusing. He said, if I want to see the kids, come to the city they live in. That's it. End of story. He's not discussing it. So I don't know when I'm going to see them again.
Now, when you have contact now via phone or via Skype, is that supervised or unsupervised?
He is generally there in the room with them. Not always, but generally. Yeah.
Uh-huh. I
can usually hear him in the background. He usually says, come on, dinner's ready, let's sit down now, you have to get off the phone, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter Skyped with me last weekend, I think on a Saturday morning, her time, and it was great. We were finally talking to each other and seeing each other after several weeks of no real contact. And within about 4 or 5 minutes, she said, oh, Mom, I have to go. Dad says I have to go do my laundry now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like a total control freak, a total coercive, abusive guy. My goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as we know, most of the... Sorry.
Yeah. Your story just is just the prime example of paternal entitlement, and the way that the system is just promoting that and facilitating that and encouraging that, and it's absolutely disturbing. The entire story is absolutely disturbing, and it's just my goodness, paternal fascism comes to mind.
Yes, that's a very good way of describing it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the mother is basically written out of the story, written out of the picture, and not seen as important. The heritage, the cultural, linguistic, and sort of national heritage that my children have is very mixed. I'm actually half Indian, so I was always careful to speak a few words in Hindi, the Indian language that was used very often when I was a child. I've used that with my children. We are not religious, but I took them to church every Christmas, and I took them to the Indian temple every Diwali, so that they would grow up with both cultures and familiar with both cultures. Now, of course, they have no contact with anything like that. Their grandparents, who they saw at least twice a year, for at least a month each time, they have not seen since November 2014. My parents are very old and frail, and they worry that they will never see their grandchildren again in their lifetime, and sadly, they may well be right.
Yep, it's a really important point that you're bringing up that hasn't really been discussed on any of my shows yet. Is the grandparents in these situations? Like my mom is 82, and she hasn't spoken to my daughter Jasmine since she was deported in April 2014. I mean, it's just inhuman.
Yeah.
None of that is taken into consideration. And it's one thing to have an extremely abusive ex-husband like the ones we're dealing with, but it's another thing to have family court not even weighing those types of situations for the remaining of the maternal family, not being completely cut off from your children. It's just outrageous,
exactly. Yes, it is. It's so sad for the rest of the family. It's so unfair because children have a right, I think, to know both sides of their family. They should know both sides of their family if it's at all possible.
Absolutely.
But our children are being denied that. They're being denied their language as well. Your daughter, too, has been removed from her mother tongue.
Yep.
Which is a terrible thing to do.
And what are our children supposed to think of this? That mothers are to be discarded with the trash after several years of taking care of them? Like, oh yeah, mom doesn't matter. We just turn her off. Like we push the delete button and mom just disappears. And now you just have to deal with your dad. And, don't think about all the friends that you have, your cousins, your uncles, your aunts, your grandparents, your mom, and just, it's just dad now. I'm like,
exactly.
excuse
Yeah, Dad and his new girlfriend. Yes, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so true, and it's so sad for the children. I mean, as we know, maternal deprivation is, I think, wasn't it recently agreed by the United Nations that this could be seen as a human rights issue?
It's been decided by the United Nations that this is a form of torture.
Yes, well, it is. And also, I know that studies have shown, academic research and scientific studies have shown that children who go through severe trauma, such as being denied contact with a mother, maternal deprivation, suffer so much in later life. They have lowered academic achievement, higher rates of suicide, higher rates of diabetes and cancer, a lack of ability to form good relationships. This is sentencing our children to a bad life, to cutting off a lot of their options for the future.
Yeah, and the children don't understand what's happening because they have, faith in the justice system, in the adult world. They grow up trusting the world, and they have no idea why this is happening. And then they're fed all this nonsense that we're supposedly dangerous and crazy. And what are they supposed to think of that? What are they supposed to make of that? And this creates huge trust issues in the children. And from the interviews I've had with children who are now adults that have dealt with this. And I had Brian on in one of my earlier shows, who was an adult child who survived this. And he told me, he said, all my relationships, whether it's friends or intimate relationships, my trust is zero. I don't trust anyone, and particularly not authorities, because they've completely screwed up my childhood. So he walks around with severe trust issues, which damages all their future relationships and their options for harmonious relationships in their future lives. It's so damaging. And you're right. It's like it sets them up for all kinds of psychological issues, drug abuse issues, promiscuous behavior, any form of acting out, dissociative identity disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and all these have physical effects as well. A lot of the children get sick. They develop chronic problems. It's horrific. It's totally, and yes, you're right. Experts have concluded that maternal deprivation is a severe form of child abuse. Any type of contact denial to a parent is a severe form of child abuse. And, as far as I'm concerned, all child abuse should be handled in criminal court and not in these family courts.
Exactly, where the proof of evidence is handled differently.
Yeah, they did. Evidence is not even handled at all, right? In family
exactly.
court.
I mean, the judge. It was explained to me that the judge in the family court decides what is fact and what is not fact, and after that decision has been made, that is legal fact. So when she said to me, "You are a liar, you're manipulative, you're deceptive,ve," that is now a legal fact. And
they don't even know
you.
You.
A wonderful person. Exactly.
These people are strangers, and they decide that they have no psychological training, no degree in that, but they can just decide that you're crazy and Dad is great, and that's that. Children are fine.
What's also concerning? Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say what's also concerning to me is that I dealt with many professionals in England, the police, social workers, therapists and counsellors, doctors, the children's schools. I had a lot of contact. I volunteered there every week. I had attorneys. I was investigated pretty thoroughly in order to get my legal aid. They do look into things very, very closely. And the judge in the United States just laughed at all those opinions. Basically, she looked at me, she said, "You're a liar." So everybody in England got me wrong. Everyone that believed me and tried to help me was wrong. She looked at me and she was the one that got it right.
Yeah, the same thing in my case where the judge said, these 6 experts in the Netherlands, they're all crazy. I'm like, okay, so whatever. All Dutch people are crazy and all Americans are sane, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. And
well, let's take a little... Right. No, they don't know nothing about Hague. Let's take a little break, a little musical break, and then when we get back, we'll talk a little bit about the activism that you're doing with the organization GlobalARRK, that you're working with to try and improve situations like ours.
Right.
All right. Yeah. Let's do that. I'll see you on the other side. And welcome back to Hell is for Children. And I've been talking to Anita Duncan, who is a British protective mother who lost her children to an abusive father in the United States through a Hague Convention case. And I want to start the second hour thanking Bobby Biesinger from World Integrity News Network for allowing us to have this platform to talk about our cases. And as I announced at the start of the show will be moving to live CCN TV, and I will keep you all updated on when that's about to happen. And the song you just heard is from Pat Benatar. It's called Hell is for Children. And Pat Benatar has been very supportive of our show. I requested whether we could use her song as the official theme song for the show. And she wrote me, "We're honored to be part of such a wonderful project. Blessings to you and your family. We are so sorry you ever experienced any of that horror." I really want to thank Pat Benatar for supporting our cause, for caring about children, for making this song, for playing this song all over the world, for all the years that she's been playing. And I really want to use this opportunity to thank Pat Benatar for allowing us to use the song as the theme song and to be supportive of our cause. So let's get back to Anita here. Anita, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Gerta.
Hi. So we talked. You've told your story in the first hour, and as I explained to our guest, you're part of an organization called GlobalARRK. And you're working together with Roz Osborne of this organization. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. She's the founder.
Right. So, and we talked, when we were setting up the show, we talked about Roz coming on the show, and she wasn't able to come on the show today, but she created a recording of what the organization is about. And I want to play that recording now. So we can kind of listen to Roz as she explains the mission statement of GlobalARRK, and so our listeners are informed about the mission of the organization and how they can get in touch, how people can get in touch with her and the organization which you are part of. So let's go and listen. Let's listen to her recording, and then we'll be right back.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So here's Roz Osborne.
Hi, my name is Roz Osborne. I've been asked to do this interview by Gert and Anita. I work with Anita on a project called GlobalARRK, which we recently started, but has been going in a different form since 2012. In 2012, I was what we call a stuck mum, and I was stuck in Portugal for several years because I couldn't bring my children back to the UK, which is where we were from. So I started up a group on Facebook called Expat Stuck Mums, and over the years it grew and grew. And recently we changed the name to GlobalARRK because we felt that it would be a better, more positive name to grow this movement, really. And GlobalARRK stands for Global Action on Relocation and Return with Kids, because what it's about is helping parents to relocate abroad and to come home, back home again with their kids. Because at the moment there's an enormous global problem where families are moving abroad for work or to get a better life, and then they split up abroad and they find that they can't return home with their kids, And this is unfortunately resulting, like in Anita's case, in parents actually losing their kids. And it's absolutely heartbreaking. So at GlobalARRK, what we're trying to do is support stuck parents, and we do this all over the world. So we link them up to experienced lawyers. If they are struggling financially, we try to get them pro bono representation. We try to signpost them to relevant charities that can help them as well. And another aspect of how we support stuck parents is that we connect parents locally. So we have country coordinators in lots of countries that are sort of become experts really at knowing the best lawyers in their area, the best charities, and also meeting up for coffee and sharing advice and experiences locally, and just helping parents to stay and helping them get through this dreadful time in their life where they are extremely lonely sometimes and without support. So it's incredibly helpful for those parents to have a support network locally where they can go when they're feeling down or whatever. We also get a lot of messages from stuck parents on Facebook and through email, so we write back to them and share our experiences as a group of parents that have been through it. And we also, if we get a difficult question, we can check with one of our friendly lawyers and to hopefully get a clarification on any tricky aspects to the law. We also offer emotional support and practical support as well. So as well as supporting stuck parents, GlobalARRK also campaigns to change the law, because at the moment the law isn't really working very well. So we've got several campaigns on the go at the moment. The main one is called the Cooling Off Period campaign, which basically aims to change the way habitual residence works, so that families have a cooling off period after they move abroad to decide whether they like living in the new country or whether they would actually prefer to return home. And they have the option to return home within 2 years. So other campaigns that we'd like to see are relocation applications. Just need to get a lot faster. So relocation application is after you've been living in a country and your children are habitually resident in that country. If you then wish to move out of that country, you'll need to apply to relocate. Even if the whole family is, for example, from the US, and they've moved over to Australia, they would still need to apply to relocate if they wish to take the children out of the country back home to America. So these relocation cases can go on for years. In our experience, between 1 and 5 years is absolutely normal. And the problem with that is that quite often the parent who wishes to go home isn't really able to stay for that length of time. They sometimes might not have a visa, they sometimes just don't have the funds to stay put. They also probably don't have the funds to pay for an extremely expensive lawyer for that period of time. So what we're campaigning for is for relocation applications to be expedited in the court, to be seen as urgent, so that they would be maximum 6 months in court before a decision is made. Another aspect to what we'd like to see happen is about mirror orders. We see a lot of parents, mostly mothers, forced to return to the country of habitual residence of their children by the high courts. And often when the courts tell the mother to go back with the kids, they're given what's called undertakings to protect them and to make sure that their kids are safeguarded and so on. But unfortunately, these undertakings are not legally upheld in the other country. The other country doesn't recognise them often. Not in every country, but in a lot of countries. So what needs to happen is a thing called mirror orders. Mirror orders are when both courts agree to uphold the decisions made. And this is really the way forward. But unfortunately, a lot of the time at the moment, because mirror orders are more expensive and they take longer, the courts say that they don't have time because they're trying to comply with the Hague Convention's stipulation that proceedings must be as quick as possible, and if possible within 6 weeks. So they feel that there's not enough time to make mirror orders. But this is having devastating consequences for those families who are being returned without proper protection, because it can mean that they get back to the other country and they're put back in that situation of abuse and poverty, which makes them extremely vulnerable. So this is actually an enormous problem that could easily be solved if mirror orders were put in place. The other big problem that we have is that parents don't have permanent visas to stay in the countries that they're being sent back to. So under the Hague Convention, they're being sent back to a country that they don't actually have a visa to live and work in, which makes it impossible for the parent, usually the mother, to stay with the child, which is just awful, because you know that you're being sent back and you're going to lose your child at some point. So obviously we're campaigning for governments to only send back parents if they've got a permanent visa to live and work in that country, because obviously it's against everybody's human rights to send parents back if they don't even have a visa to stay there. So we have these various campaigns on the go. We also lobby decision makers. We're having conversations with the Hague at the moment, as well as trying to talk to the FCO and organisations like CACU. And another aspect to what we do, of course, is education and prevention, because quite often we're hearing that families have no idea about the Hague Convention at all when they decide to relocate abroad. So we think it's really important that they go into their move abroad with their eyes open, and they know the risk, so that they can make a decision. Do they really want to move abroad? Do they think that's definitely going to be okay for their family? And to hopefully, if they really need to move abroad and want to move abroad, they need to think about what's going to happen to the kids if they do split up abroad. So we have available to download on our website, GlobalARRK.org, a pre-migration contract that couples can take to an experienced international lawyer, which we can advise on, and take along, receive some mediation, and also sign this pre-migration contract, which basically says that within 2 years of a move abroad, neither of us will use the Hague Convention to force the other one to return home. So, I mean, it's a really tricky one, because most couples, when they're moving abroad, it's the last thing that they want to be thinking about is things going wrong. In a sense, I think people go into it with rose-tinted spectacles on, and they think, everything's going to be wonderful when we move abroad. But unfortunately, and statistically speaking, this is just not the case. Things do go wrong with people's marriages abroad, and in a way, there's more pressure on a marriage than, I think, living abroad than there is when you're just living at home. So people really need to think about this. This is an enormous message that we need to get out there. Before you move abroad, find out about the Hague Convention, go to our website, read the information that we've got, and download the pre-migration contract, and then your kids will be safe for 2 years. Okay. So, other things that we do, we have a website, www.globalarrk.org. So there's loads of information on there. Our YouTube video is on there, which again is aimed at preventing this happening to families moving abroad. We also have a really active Facebook site, so we try and post relevant articles and so on up on the Facebook site, and there's lots of lively debate, and there's lots of support as well, so that parents know that they're not alone in this situation, that there's lots of other people out there, and there's lots of support out there And I think once you've been through it, you really do understand how awful it is, and often people are incredibly generous with their time and spend a lot of time supporting each other, which is just fantastic. And we've also got research, and we also we're trying to collect some statistics. So we have a questionnaire that we ask parents to fill out. It only takes about 5-10 minutes, but we're trying to collect as much information about this issue as possible so that we can take it to decision makers and tell them this is what's happening. Because at the moment there's so little research being done on this issue. People really are completely in the dark about it, which is awful considering the devastating consequence that it can have of children losing their parents through no fault of their own, just because they moved abroad essentially. So we think it's really important to collect that research. So if you are a stuck parent or you've had to return home without your kids, please do fill in the questionnaire. It's incredibly important that we build up understanding and knowledge on this issue. Okay, so I'm thinking that's about it. But if you do have any questions, please do get in contact with us. My email is expatstuckparent@gmail.com, and please get in contact through the Facebook site, which is called GlobalARRK, Expat Stuck Parent. You can Facebook message us, you can email us if you have any more questions, and thanks ever so much for having me on. Thank you.
Okay, so that was a recording by Roz Osborne, who is the director of GlobalARRK, and I'll bring Anita back on. Hi, Anita, can you hear me?
Hi, Desi. Yes, I can. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just, I thought that was a really wonderful, explanation of what GlobalARRK is doing. And I'm on the website, and I just wanted to mention, spell out the name of the website, of the URL. It's www.globalarrk.org, and the word ARK has 2 R's in it, so it's GLOBALARRK. And so when you go to globalarrk.org and you click on the in the top navigation bar on the ESM statistics, you can see that GlobalARRK is collecting data about these kinds of cases, and the website shows statistics gathered so far in 2015. And it states, in the past year, we have helped 135 moms and 4 dads, and only 16 of those parents have successfully been able to return home with proper relocation orders. That is a very disappointing number. We don't know if this is a reflection of everything what's happening out there. So it's very important that people start filling in the questionnaire and submitting their experience to GlobalARRK so we can get a good picture of what the numbers are. Because if we look at this, then we can see that mothers are not helped, and that it's mostly it seems to be a deportation treaty for fathers' rights. This is the Hague Convention, and I would love to be proven wrong about this. But another thing that I wanted to kind of talk to you about is the part of domestic violence in these kind of Hague Convention cases. From your experience, what you're seeing with the people that contact your organization, is that an issue that comes up a lot, or what would you say about statistics around that?
Well, we don't have accurate statistics at GlobalARRK on how many cases domestic violence is actually involved. We're hoping to get better statistics on that. My personal belief, Gather, is that in any case in which custody, any case involving child custody that gets to court, you can believe that there is some form of abuse involved. Most parents who truly want the best for their children, do not fight it out in court. They do the best for their children. But if one parent, or possibly both, have some sort of control issue, they're not that worried about the best thing for their child, they want to win, they want the power, they want the control, they want the money, the image, whatever it is, it will go to court. So all of these cases that go to court, one parent or both parents are displaying some kind of abusive characteristic within the relationship. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something we can definitely start from. That's a position we can start from. What we should be doing is investigating further into what kind of abuse is it and why is it happening. But that's something that we'll have to look into perhaps further down the line. But I believe that there is always some form of abuse in any court case concerning custody.
I agree, because if in a quote-unquote normal divorce situation that has international aspects, you would sit down as divorced parents and say, hey, what is the best solution for our children? What is the best country for them to grow up in? Where do they have the best chances in regards to education, health insurance, contact with family? How can we set up an international visitation arrangement to make sure that the children are constantly in contact with both parents? And, you try to resolve it as adults.
Exactly.
If you get to the point, if you get to the point of court, then it means that mediation or any type of out-of-court settlement didn't work. So I think that's a very fair assessment that you just made. I want to bring in Sarah Kinnard. I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correctly. She's also part of GlobalARRK, and I think I see her on my dashboard. So let's see if Sarah is there. Hi, Sarah. Can you hear me? Hi.
I can hear you. Hello.
Welcome to Health for Children.
Thank you.
It's great to have you on. So, are you also located in the UK, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm in London too.
Okay. So you work with Roz and Anita at GlobalARRK. Can you tell us a little bit what kind of cases do you see? Is it mostly moms, or is it what's the ratio of people that are contacting you?
Yeah, I haven't been working for very long with Roz and Anita, but since I've been with them, most of the stuff that I've seen has been mainly from mothers, I'd say, mainly from mothers. A couple of dads, but mainly from mothers, wanting advice on what to do and, trying to avoid or wanting to know about the Hague Convention and wanting to make sure that they don't, get themselves into any difficulties.
So when they contact you, is that usually at the point of when they're considering a move back, or is it when they're already kind of caught up in legal situations?
Both, really, but there are a lot of inquiries from the sort of onset of when they're thinking, I want to go, but I don't know how to do it, and I don't know what the best way to do it is. So that's a good point to catch it at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'm looking here at the statistics page, and it says 81% of parents contacting GlobalARRK have never heard of the Hague Convention and didn't know they could not return to their home country with the children. So it sounds like one of the things that we all need to do, and I'm hoping to do that through this radio program as well, and pretty soon the TV show, to bring awareness to this, to inform parents before they actually, move back, thinking, oh, I can move back, right?
Yeah.
and it's so important because we're living in a more global, globally mobile world. It's so much easier to find a job in another country, and you just think like, well, I'll just pick up and go, but it just doesn't work that way.
Absolutely. And people, when you say to somebody, when I tell people about my case, they say, well, they're your children. Surely you can just go home, because you don't have a clue that there's something there that can say, actually, no, you can't just do that, because it's sort of it's a natural instinct. If things are bad, you want to go home, and you can't.
Yeah, especially in cases where there's domestic violence, you want to go home to your family and feel safe and supported. And
absolutely.
Another really important point that Roz brought up during the recording was the fact that situations, in my situation, for example, and I think in your situation too, Anita, like even if I was to go back to the United States, I don't have a green card anymore, so it's not like I could just go back and start all over again, which is what the Hague Convention judges told me. It's like, oh, just go back and just, start all over again. It's like, no, that's not possible because I don't have a permit anymore to live and work there. So, none of these treaties keep, they don't consider any of this in court, which is outrageous. So, I'm hoping that, we can somehow create new laws or reform of the current Hague Convention to consider, to take that into consideration, because the Hague Convention was drafted in, I believe, the 1980s, I believe 1985 or something, when none of this was, had developed in this more global, mobile direction, right?
That's right. And Sarah's case was actually quite some time ago. So she's known about this issue for many, many years now. And yes, it has been happening to parents for the last over 30 years, which is terrible. Nobody's made the changes that are necessary to deal with the globalization that we see today.
Right. And this Hague Convention treaty, from what I've seen, since my daughter was deported, I've been in touch with you, Anita. We know a lot of the same moms in this situation. Yeah. That Article 13 of the Hague Convention treaty that states that if there is any form of abuse going on, if the child could possibly be harmed upon return, whether that's psychologically, emotionally, or physically, or when the child is resistant towards return to their country of origin, then they don't have to. That Article 13 barely ever gets implemented in court. Is that what you guys also see in GlobalARRK with your cases?
Well, we've had a lot of parents who've tried to invoke Article 13, but the lawyers basically will tell you not to bother because it's not seen as a valid defense. I was actually told by the CAFCAS official, that's the kind of child services social worker who interviews the children and reports back to court in London, that he had returned children to war zones where they were afraid of being bombed, but it was not seen as an objection, it was a preference. So if the children prefer to stay in one place and don't explain it properly as an objection rather than a preference, they will be returned. And even if they say they object, if they're old enough to understand the difference and to show that they are terrified of returning, they will probably still be returned. It's all about returning, keeping those statistics high, and returning the children to what is seen as their place of habitual residence, even if they've been away from it for over a year.
So this is definitely where we need to put pressure on, the folks that are at the United Nations, putting this, working on this treaty, because these treaties they do get changed and adjusted. And I wanted to bring up information. I hope I can find it here so quickly. I'm kind of on my website, there's this big global conference in Dublin next year. It's a world conference on family law. And I would like everybody to go on Google and just Google that. Dublin Family Law Conference, because we need to go there. And I highly recommend GlobalARRK also going to this conference, because number 7 on that list will discuss the Hague Convention, and we need to go there and explain that this Article 13 must be implemented in cases of domestic violence, because if that's not implemented in our court cases, then it's simply a deportation treaty that only considers jurisdiction. And that has nothing to do anymore with the best interest of the child. So the website of the conference, the 7th World Congress on Family Law and Children's Rights, will be happening on from June 4th through June 7th, 2017 in Dublin. And the URL is www.wcflcr2017.com. So you can still submit abstracts until June 30th of this year. So that's another, less than 2 weeks. You can submit a 2-paragraph abstract on what you would like to talk about during that conference. I highly recommend everyone in the world listening right now to submit abstracts and to speak at this conference about what's happening to us and our children, and not just on the Hague Convention, but really on what's happening around the globe with this judicial child trafficking, which is really what we're all caught up in. So, Sarah, you are also a Hague Convention victim. Is that correct?
I won't say victim anymore, because I had a good outcome eventually, but it took a lot of years, and the Hague was evoked twice against me. I took the children in 2000, and then again in 2001. It's quite a long time ago now, and and luckily it hasn't completely all stuck in my mind in great detail, but the court case pretty much dragged on until my eldest son was an adult, and it basically just fizzled out like that. But he went to court himself when he was 12, and he had his own solicitor, and he said he didn't want to go back. And he won his case.
Wow, that's wonderful.
But I didn't win any of my cases. I was returned both times.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go back the second time, though. I went back the first time, but the second time I didn't go, and I looked into other sort of ways of staying, and the only way that anyone thought it would be possible to stay was if Sam, my eldest, would have his own case, which was a really difficult decision as well, because he didn't really want to. Kids don't really want to be involved on that level.
Absolutely.
They don't want to have to make the decisions.
And they shouldn't have to choose, you know what I mean? And that's an awful situation to be put into when you're a child. You know, this is why, you know, for all the people who are listening, you know, don't use your children as pawns in a battle that you have with your ex. It's just so damaging to children. You know, that's really, we need to stop this coercive control thing that seems to be happening mostly by fathers, inflicted on mothers and their children. And, you know, this is my call out to these people that are involved in this. Please stop it. You are damaging your children. You're damaging the mothers of your children. As it states here as well in the statistics that many moms, you know, end up homeless. And Here's even the states here even that a mom return to her abuser rather than risk losing their children. That's just awful, What an awful situation to be in. We need this domestic violence and child molestation, child abuse to be taken serious within these Hague Convention trials. So I hope you guys will be attending the Dublin conference.
I'm actually looking at it online. I'm just looking at it now.
Okay. Yeah, we need to keep each other posted on these types of opportunities to get our voices heard. And this is one, I just started Googling, conferences, family law, and this one popped up, and I started sharing it on social media. What else are you guys doing in regards to contacting the United Nations on our behalf?
Well, we're not in contact with the United Nations per se. We're in touch with the organization that runs the what we call the Hague Convention. And there is a meeting coming up next year in which there will be discussion on what amendments are seen as making sense and needed, required for the Hague Convention. So we hope to have some say in that. We hope to perhaps be able to represent the parents that have contacted us, to put forward our view, use our statistics to show that we do need to see some changes made to the Hague Convention so that children can be better served by these international laws.
Where is this particular meeting?
I believe that would be in the Netherlands.
Oh, really? Oh my goodness! I will be there. I will be attending.
Well, I believe it's like a kind of government type meeting, obviously with the signatories. So we're looking into that at the moment. What we have done is we have applied to become an official registered charity in the United Kingdom. That would be like a 501c in the United States. We're just waiting to hear back on that at the moment. The Charities Commission does have a bit of a backlog, so we should have already received our registration, but we are still waiting. And once we are a registered charity, I feel that will give us a little bit more legitimacy as well. People will understand that there really is a problem, that parents, especially mothers, are getting stuck, they're being badly treated, the abuse is being furthered and perpetuated by the court system and by this international law. And I hope that we will be able to see some change, to lobby politicians around the world, to speak to lawyers, to help get proper legal advice for the parents affected by this, and to see some changes, like the ones you've been talking about, where abuse is looked into, where the children's best interests are seriously considered and are paramount and are considered as the most important thing, rather than the interests of the court, the interest of the country, the interest of the father or the mother even possibly, the interest of nationality and citizenship. We need to forget all that and focus on what's really best for our children.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful goal. And one of the things that I also wanted to add on to that as maybe something to consider is, like in my particular case, after my daughter was deported from the Netherlands to the United States, the case actually was discussed in Dutch Parliament. And, the Secretary of State, Taven, who was Secretary of State at that time, he's now fired for taking drug bribes and for being involved in pedophilia scandals. But at that time, he actually kept his answers about my daughter's case classified. But what he did say, first of all, it's very odd that he kept his answers classified. I still would like to know why. But he was asked about the Hague Convention by Dutch Parliament. He was asked, why is the Dutch government not implementing Article 13 in these cases? And and he answered, he said, we have our own policy, and our own policy is called first return the child and then discuss what's going on. Well, that makes that it's in my view that actually then overrides the Hague Convention treaty. So here we have a country, the Netherlands, who's basically so arrogant to say Well, we're not even looking at the Hague Convention. We have our own policy in these cases. So what I really would like to suggest is, and I also put this out to the United Nations, we need a judicial oversight committee, an international judicial oversight committee that makes sure that all these countries are adhering to the Hague Convention Treaty as it is stated, with all the articles included, and not have countries doing their own thing with it. Because, you know...
Well, sadly, yes, I think that attitude of the Netherlands about first return the child is the prevalent attitude around the world. It's what most countries seem to think is the best thing to do. And I know that in the United Kingdom, the statistics indicate that the majority, by far the majority of children in Hague cases are simply returned. That seems to be the main goal, the main objective is return the child, return the child. Mm-hmm. And then they can say, look, we keep the Hague, we return all the children, we're doing so well here. But they're not doing so well as far as the well-being of the children is concerned, because they do not look at why have the children been taken out of that country where they apparently were residing. What are the issues there? And that gets back to what you were saying about abuse. If the primary caregiver is the mother or possibly the father, and this primary caregiver takes the child and goes to another country, lives there for quite some time, very often with permission, the other parent can then change their mind and say, I want you to come back now. And if you don't jump, the Hague Convention can come into force and you're an abductor. Or if you do actually try and run away to security and safety to your home country, you are also classed as an abductor. And you will be returned and treated badly in the other country as an abductor.
Yeah, and I also...
what's happening.
Exactly. I also ran into a case last week where a Hague Convention parent contacted me and stated, my ex has taken off with the children to another country, and I have won the Hague Convention trial, but since the other parent is not returning with the children, that parent is now guilty of child abduction. And because the parent is not returning, that other country is not willing to extradite that parent with the children, because at crossing the borders, that parent would be then detained and then separated from the children, and we don't want that. So in other words, this parent has won the Hague Convention, but the other country is not complying because the abducting parent would be arrested when crossing the border. So the Hague Convention totally doesn't work in any of these cases, it seems.
Well, sadly, that case that you're describing is quite unusual, because the cases that I've come across and heard about, even if the returning parent, the so-called abductor, and I really do not like using that word for a parent, but if the so-called abductor has to return, the child has to return, so of course the primary caregiver, now called an abductor, has to return, they may well be subject to arrest on arrival and imprisonment. But in most countries that doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. As we've seen, there are so-called orders and undertakings that are made, and I know that in Britain these orders and undertakings, as Rolf talked about, are made to the court. You then return to the country of prior habitual residence of the child, and those orders and undertakings are ignored completely. That's what happened in my case, and I know many, many other mothers to whom that has happened.
It happened in my case as well, where the father of my daughter was ordered not to tell any of the American authorities what was going on, so I could safely cross the border, but he did it anyway. So,
right.
And none of that's taken into consideration. So now I can't cross the border, and no one seems to care. My daughter's disappeared. No one knows if she's still alive, except for the people out there somewhere in California where she supposedly is. I don't know anything, and no one wants to help. And that's another thing that I wanted to bring up, is the role of the central authority in all of this. What has your findings been about the role in the central authority? Because they're supposed to help us, and they're not, it seems.
They're supposed to help, but it seems to be more of a number crunching issue. It's more of return the children. if someone makes an application invoking the Hague Convention, return the children, let the courts in that jurisdiction decide what happens, which, as we know, usually leads to a very unfavorable outcome. What we're also trying to do, Gerta, is to look into Article 21, which is about rights of access, because in cases like yours and mine and many others, we do not have very much access or none at all to our children after these kind of cases. And yet the Hague Convention is also supposed to be there to ensure that you have a right to see your children in an international situation. Yet nobody can seem to explain how that's supposed to work. So that is also something at GlobalARRK that we are looking into. We're hoping to educate ourselves and others so that we can help parents who have been separated from their children to at least have some kind of meaningful access to their children.
Absolutely. Now, in your from your knowledge base, like in my situation, just to kind of pick your brain about my particular current situation,
Sure.
Could I use the Article 21 to restart a convention case in the United States?
I wish I could answer that, Gert. I really do. I would like to know for my own case, and we can't seem to get very much information on how it works, how to use it, how to implement it. I'm hoping, and I believe that the original intention was so that in cases like yours, you could use it to make sure that you have contact and access to your daughter. But at the moment, I'm afraid I really can't say.
Yeah, because
we've asked various lawyers to help us, but so far we've not had any information.
I know there's one other Hague Convention protective mom who started inquiring about this particular issue and was told that the fact that the father is not allowing any type of contact is considered reverse kidnapping.
Right.
And so, this is where I'm kind of stuck at this point. Like, okay, so what do I do then? Because then that means that local authorities in the United States should now detain the father and return my daughter to me. But so how do you go about that as a Hague Convention mom or, parent who's lost contact?
Exactly, that's a really good question, and I really wish that I had a good answer. All I can say is that we're not letting it drop. We are trying to follow up on it and find out more about how this works, how we might be able to use it, how parents like yourself might be able to use it, and like me too. We all need help with this. And as soon as we do, of course, we will be using that information to help parents and to put the information on our website if it's possible as well, that people could look and see how they can use Article 21 in order to at least assure themselves that their children are still there, are still okay, as in your case where you have no information.
Right. I think
the minimum.
That's a great goal to have, to add something on the website with tips and advice and links to the law and what you can do. And I want to use this opportunity to for folks that are listening and feel that they want to help. If you want to help GlobalARRK, please go to their website and donate money. There's a donate button on the homepage. Please donate money, because what we need protective moms that work within GlobalARRK and other professionals and experts that are affiliated with this organization to be on this full-time. We need office equipment and expertise around the world, and in order to do that, we need funding, right? I mean, I'm saying we. I'm not in your organization, but I'm just saying on the whole,
you're associated.
Yeah,
you're quite right.
Money.
And I mean, we are all volunteers. We are all currently mothers. We do have one father who works with us sometimes, but mostly we're just mothers who've been affected by the Hague, or who are close to people who've been affected by Hague and want to help. A lot of our parents, like Roz, our founder, and Sarah, who we've just been talking to, have actually come out the other side. They are now with their children. Things have worked out eventually for them. Others, like me, are still going through it, where I don't see my children. I don't know when I will contact them. But we're all volunteers. We all try and hold down other jobs and make money to support ourselves, and we do this in our spare time on our laptops at home. So our website is pretty much under construction. We're changing from being Expat Stuck Parent to our new name of GlobalARRK. So I hope your listeners will excuse us if they read things about Expat Stuck Parent. But we are trying to work on all that and update everything. We're getting our charitable status. We do not have any funding. We do not have any money. All we have is what we put into it ourselves. So anyone who would like to help, who would like to volunteer with us, we're always grateful for help. Anyone who has advice or can offer any kind of education or fact sheet, that would be important and useful. Anyone who has contacts, who'd like to put us in touch with politicians or lawyers or social workers, anything like that, we're grateful for all that, any opportunity we can have.
Yeah, and I want to also commend the moms who have children who are now adults who still continue to fight to reform the situation and create better situations for the moms and particularly the children and any duped fathers as well. So, I thank you so much for being around, for organizing in this fashion. It's truly wonderful. I hope you continue to grow and get donations and get the non-for-profit status so we can, move forward on this. And I hope to have you on future shows as well when I interview other Hague Convention protective moms who are in difficult situations, so maybe you can offer them advice and tips emotional support.
Of course, Gerta. Thank you for this opportunity, also to bring your organization to the awareness of all your listeners. And anytime you'd like one of us, one of the volunteers, to help, to phone in, to offer help or advise, anything we can do, we're always happy to help.
Well, thank you, Anita, and thank you, Sarah. Thanks for being on, both of you. Thanks for the work that you do. And thank you, Anita, for sharing your story, for being brave and courageous and, sharing it. I know it's very difficult and challenging, so I totally appreciate it. And I hope that the listeners were helped. And, for listeners who are in our situation to know that, hey, you're not alone. Get in touch with us, and we'll try and support you as best we can. And
that's right.
I look forward to having you on in future shows.
Well, thank you, Gerta, and thanks for all you do. I know your situation is just as hard, if not harder, than most of ours. So you're doing a great job too. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Well, this is the point that we have to say goodbye. We've reached the end of the show. So thank you all, and look forward to talking with you again in the future. And I hope my listeners will tune in again next week. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, Gerta. Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Sarah. Bye, Anita. Bye-bye.
Bye.